Okay, so what is microframing? So here's what I'll do is I'll go through just a couple of projects, give you an idea of what's going on. So for instance, this is be a bed that was built using microframing. Now if I go to a raised garden bed, this would be a raised garden bed where microframing was used. And then I am going to jump over to another project, which would be shelters. So this would be a roofed project, still in the making, still on the drawing board, but gives you an idea of what's going on here. And now I'll go back to the typical microframed project. So for instance, on this one, this is a raised garden bed. There are 4 panels. These are the panels right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there would be 4 posts. So 1, 2, 3, 4 posts. The length and the height of those posts, the size of them, would be based on the project itself. So for instance, if we have a micro bed, then the foot posts would probably be somewhere in the range of 24 inches or so. Totally can be adjusted in height, doesn't make any difference actually. And the headboard would be quite a bit higher, the posts, and the panel that goes in between them would be quite a bit different, right? But so this is showing something of a mission style thing, but this could also be, this panel right here could be individual slats, like really common to mission style. This rail could be quite a bit less. In fact, it doesn't have to have these vertical stiles at all. It could be dropped way down. But let's go back to the micro garden. What happens with any of these is that it gives you the option of placing things inside the panels. So I'm showing this from the inside, right? This is a raised garden bed, for instance. So like a raised garden bed, one of the common ones that I do frequently is I put slate on the inside, a natural slate, and so from the outside it looks like kind of like that. And there's a few little things I need to finish up here on the drawings, but otherwise, you may or may not catch those. But on a garden bed, it can be the corrugated tin and so on. On a bed, it might be that lattice could be put in here. These could be slats going horizontal or vertical. Here it's showing with slate or tile. I've done some where it could be carpet, for instance, like right in here, it could be carpet mounted to a plywood panel to match the carpet inside the room. And I thought it would be kind of a cool one. I haven't done it yet, but it could be to actually have photographs blown up on and mounted on like a plywood, and you could put those in there. They could even be seasonal, like Christmas, Easter, birthdays, whatever could go in there. So let's just go back again. Micro gardens, micro beds, and micro shelters. When we get into the shelters, we start adding the roof, and that would be done via purlins and rafters. I won't get into that now, but the roofing can be all kinds of things. Like here I'm showing it as a metal roofing, and again, the micro shelter is designed to pretty much to get off the shelf type roofing. Could be plywood and then shingles. It all depends on what you want to do there. And then it could also be fabric. So if you want to be able to take that building down every season and store it, for instance, you could use a fabric up in there. And then let's just go back to how a microframe is done. So here's again the bed. So I'm going to go to the 4 posts. Then there will be panels. When we get down to building it, there would be a cut list. And then so here would be a cut list, a typical cut list showing the rails, how long they are, where each of the holes is. These here represent a template. I show them in a transparent mode, but these would actually be a 3/4 inch thick PVC template that had been created on a CNC router, and then that allows people the builder to align it over the top of the rail and then use a router or a hinge bit to mark for making mortises. We'll cover that at some point in the future. Then you'd have the styles. You can see here And the stiles are, on most projects, the stiles would be right there. So that would be a stile, a vertical piece. Here you can see there's a couple of stiles, but then there's a filler in behind that. So the stiles can be pretty much any length. I'm showing them the way that a woodworker would do it, showing them basically in a horizontal mode, kind of how you'd lay them on there. And then inside of that, each of the stiles, there's a lot going on in some of the stiles, and this is all part of the templates that are included with the kit and then are taught during the classes and so on. But the stiles will have some pre-drilled holes. These are all done with templates. Then there will be some very, very special hardware. This is a product that I actually invented and have 2 US patents on. But the tenon, the threaded metal tenon, will get mounted to the stile permanently using GRK screws, and then this bolt is basically ready to go, so that when we're building the project, like in this case here, we take a look at how this will come together. And so the stiles on the end have that hardware in them, and the bolts will go through the post into the rail. And you can see here, this is why the product was patented. One of the patent claims is that it allows for bolts going into through the same post. It allows for a couple of them to be, or one direction, excuse me, would be in two bolts, and then the other one would be going one bolt, and therefore they bypass each other. They don't collide in the middle there. So that's the stiles. And then part of the project, as from a woodworking standpoint, would be, okay, how do you do all these? How do you fasten everything? So we'd be basically taking us step by step, and we would be taking the stiles, we'd be placing them on clamps. I'm showing some very special clamps here, the R&Rs, but they could be done on Bessies or Jets, and the hand grip type of clamps as well. And then, but it actually even shows where each of those clamps can be placed or recommended, so that they're not going to get in the way of us putting these same screws in here during the assembly. But it's showing how the stiles would fit between the rails and where they would fit, and then how the fasteners are going to eventually be placed going into from the rail into the stile. And this is what gives it a huge amount of strength. So then beyond the stiles, now we're going to add the rail caps. The rail caps are here and here. So if I look at, I'll go back to the micro garden, for instance. And so if we look at that, we have the rail here, but we have a rail cap here as well. And so what happens with those, I'm going to go to a little different image here, because I've got one a little further down the line. This is the micro garden. And so what happens here is, underneath, the rail cap down below actually has screws in it that are going to go up into this. Not only they're going to go into the bottom rail, and so what that does is it gives that bottom a huge amount of strength, which would be not necessarily needed in a raised garden bed, because a raised garden bed, because of all the weight and everything else, what we're going to end up doing, and I'll cover that in the garden bed itself, but is we're going to bury this bottom inch or so of the post into the ground, and so that this whole bottom rail will sit down on the ground itself, and it won't be putting all that pressure on there. But this would be really helpful in the case of a bed. So for instance, on this one here, I'll hide that for a second, and on a bed what you'd have is a 1.1/8 lip all the way around, and that would be for the bed, what do they call them, mattress slats or whatever, but slats that go across from side to side. So that would be how that works. And so we've got the rail caps covered, and then how they would go on. All right, and now again, we're going to use the same clamps, but they're going to be clamped, so it's going to be both glued, or in this case, a lot of cases, it's actually going to be an adhesive, a construction adhesive, rather than just a conventional glue. But that's what's going to happen there. So that rail and this rail will not only get glued, but it'll also get screwed on the bottom portion. The top one probably doesn't need screws, and so therefore, so we don't have to hide those screws, I didn't show them and don't really figure on them, but they could be put in there if for some reason somebody wanted that extra strength. And then there's two different methods for joinery. There's the method where what we would call exposed joinery, and then I'm still working on these drawings, but there's another method called hidden joinery. So let me just quick go to that. So for instance, if I go to the garden bed, let's go to a bed. Okay, so if I go to the micro bed, and you can see right here that there's I'm showing it as metal, which would be this kind of industrial look that, you know, is pretty popular right now, but there's a metal strip there that's showing as a flat bar, 1 inch by 6 inch, something like that. And then you can see there's one bolt going through that way, there's 2 bolts going through the other way, and then again, that's because we don't want them to collide in the middle. But this metal strip could be a wood strip. That's one way to do it. Make it out of black walnut or cherry or something like that. Another way to do it would be to recess that and make it look like a tenon. Another way to do it would be to do nothing at all. Let's just hide that. Okay, so you could take the screws, send them in further, and then put caps over the top of those, or plugs. So that's another way to do it. But to make it even simpler yet, let's just take a look at what we can do. So I'm going to hide the mattress for a second, and then I'm going to go on the inside, and let's just take a look at that same corner. So what we can do is we can, if we're careful about what we put on the inside here, so I'm going to hide that. There is an area in here where we can take the hardware and send it through the other way. So like a common one would be to place the bolt on this piece right here on the stile, and then it would go into the post. I'll cover that in detail later, but that's one way to hide that. And so if we did that, we would totally eliminate this piece here and the bolts going from that direction. And then there's also a way, again on the inside, to basically, we'll do something here with building this up, or it can even be a metal bracket, really kind of common to beds, and that would be where the bolts actually go into the post on this side. Again, totally hiding those other brackets. Just real quick, let's just see here once. If we have a materials list, okay. So on a typical project, a microframing project, I'll provide the material list, and I'll show it pretty much in this format, and that is this. It'll show that you're going to make a panel, like a micro panel, you need 4 of those. Like for a bed or for a micro bed or even for a structure, you need 4 panels. So on that, there would be this thing called a rail cap, and it'll tell you how long it needs to be and what dimension each board needs to be. And then each of the styles as well. But then I can also take this a step further. I will take it another step further. And basically, this pink thing here represents a board, off-the-shelf board from Home Depot, Menards, wherever. But it's a off-the-shelf. Like this case, it's a 60-inch. Let's just say it's assuming a Menards 5/4 by 6-inch by 10-foot cedar deck board. And then we take that, and I can show you then where each of those pieces are going to come from out of that board. So for instance, like on this one, what we would end up doing is saying, let's get the best use of this board would be to make a stile out of this, to make a rail out of that, to make a rail cap out of that section there. It'll show you where to cut it from. And then because of that, the lengths of those, what we'll have left over is some pieces, some area at the end of that board to make the stiles. So I'll cover all of that in detail when we get into each individual project. Each of these will have videotapes showing not only digitally how to do it, but then also out in the shop as well. So that's the overview of microframing. Again, you can micro gardens, micro beds, and then also micro structures. Thanks for watching.